Okay, so we're also live on YouTube. Just wanted to mute so we didn't get any feedback.
Cool.
I'm gonna give everybody a few more minutes to come in. I know we have over 100 people registered, so we'll just wait a moment. Everyone is saying hi, how excited they are. From Riley Stark, Christoph Simmons.
Oh, Riley. Hey.
Dennis Dietrich is in the audience.
Dennis who?
Yeah. Who let him in?
Yeah. One of my students is here, and this is for the world. That's great.
Okay.
Wonder how many Zooms people have been doing in the past year.
Yeah.
Coming up on a year.
Yep, just about.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Hey, Brian. Far too many, yeah.
All right, well, I guess we could get started, and people will just keep logging on. I'm gonna record this, so I'm gonna start the recording.
Okay.
All right, so hi everyone. My name is Lindsay Nichols. I'm the Marketing and Business Development Manager at the Society of Illustrators. And we just really want to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. We're super happy to have Greg Manchess here to do a painting demo and to answer some of the questions you have. Many of you are probably familiar with Greg and his work, but for those who are not, Greg is an award-winning painter who has worked as a freelance illustrator for 40 years on advertising campaigns, magazines, and book covers. His latest projects include his first widescreen novel, Above the Timberline, released in 2017. 30 of the 120 plus paintings from the book were featured as an exhibition at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and also at the Society of Illustrators. And today, Greg lectures frequently at universities and colleges nationwide, gives workshops. We've worked with Greg a few times this year. You might have seen him do our Art Out Loud on Instagram. He also teaches at the Illustration Masterclass in Amherst, Massachusetts. And of course, you can find him at his website, manchess.com. So this evening, Greg is going to take us through the completion of a painting, and he has a little bit of a presentation for us. And at the same time, if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat, and I'm going to just kind of interject freeform throughout his presentation. So, Greg?
I guess I'll go. Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate that intro. I've been at this quite a while, as you can tell. I also do Smarter Art School. So I teach every year with Rebecca Gay's Smarter Art School. So if anybody's interested in taking any of my classes there, it's pretty easy to look up smarterartschool.com. And this coming semester, I'm doing a whole semester's worth, 14 weeks devoted to just working with portrait and likenesses and body language with faces and expressions and things like that. So let me just say tonight, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in there. Lindsay's going to alert me to as many as she can. A lot of my acquaintances here and students and that, you know how this goes. So go ahead and ask questions if you have them. If not, I won't hold it against you. I won't give you a bad grade. We don't grade. Anyway, tonight, maybe you saw the flyer or whatever, Facebook or Instagram. I'm going to do a painting of the Mandalorian helmet. and talk you through that. So you've seen the finish already. So Lindsay, I just go ahead and share the screen now, right?
Yep. Let me know if it doesn't come up as an option.
Okay. I'm gonna knock out my video once that's done. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Almost there. Hang on. There we go. And you can see this okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. All right, you guys. Some of you have been through this before, but you know what? I got a much better camera and much better detail. And I also got the idea to go ahead and do the demo and record it. And so some of you have been through this before, but it's pre-recorded and I'm going to talk through it. So I don't have to worry about trying to figure out what I'm going to say and what I'm painting and thinking in the same moment. But so here's the finished painting on the left, and we'll have the video here in a second. First, I'll show you the reference I had chosen to work from. I spent probably 2 to 3 hours trying to pick the right reference, try to figure out what I wanted to do. It's important to play to your advantage when it comes to a demo like this or just working on your own painting. So I didn't want to do a straight on shot of the helmet. I wanted an angle. I wanted to show a bit of a different angle on the helmet that you see in the series, but seems that everybody shoots the same angle when they show it in just photography. So I shot a bunch from the TV screen and all that, and finally found this one that I liked, but wasn't crazy about the color. So you can see that I've changed that in the final. So this is my guide, and the head tilt is important to me. The angle on the shoulders and exposure of a little bit of neck is important. Background, not so much. That's going to be paint. So I wasn't worried about that. But I did the typical cool light on one side, following this general reference, and then changing this entire side to, almost the entire side, to warm. And so I got this. It's rather difficult to shoot oil paint because of the reflections and stuff. So I doctored up some of these reflections. In Photoshop, I had to kill a bunch of them. There was a whole bunch in here and in here. So anyway, without further ado, if we have more people coming, they'll have to catch up. All right, let's start this thing. And we will, oh, let's knock out the sound there, okay. And we'll put this back. So basically in the beginning here, I projected that reference down onto the board. This is 5 inches square. I'll talk a little bit more on that in a second, but what I did was I wanted to get these lines right, you know. So drawing those freehand was going to take a lot of time. We all can do that. If we put enough time in it, you can get those lines down, but I went ahead and projected it because it's a time saver. So what I'm doing right now is putting in the first layer of paint, which is generally a dark layer. And that's a mixture of transparent earth red and Payne's gray, really. Different mixtures, amounts allow it to go very dark or very brown. And I love the juxtaposition of that.
Now, Greg, you might start discussing the answer to this question, but Samantha Easton is asking, how do you choose what color notes to use and where to place them?
Wow, that's a good question. It took me a while to study the reference to decide that I wanted to stay with the cool that was in the reference on the right-hand side, but I had to make up the left-hand side altogether. I didn't have any reference for that. Part of that is being used to painting sunlight for 40 some years and knowing where I was going with that. But even then, when I started out, I wasn't sure that it was going to work quite right. That's always the risk, especially on camera. And I could have stopped the camera if something went wrong and changed it up, I guess. But I'm a little stubborn that way. I tend to work it out. So there wasn't too much, to answer your question, there wasn't too much decision making other than warm and cool. And then I was going to let the painting dictate how cool and how warm as I got into it. That sounds kind of unfair to maybe a beginning painter, but when you've been doing it a long time, the experience is the next thing that you want to rely on for developing your work. It took me a lot of years to decide that I had enough experience to make decisions like that. You guys will too, as you put more time into it. At this point, what I'm doing, though, is I'm establishing the darks, because I know I'm going to paint on top of that. And I'm following the reference and not following a reference. I'm following as much as is generalized in the reference. In other words, I'm not getting too detailed yet. You can see some of the detailed lines in here. That's pretty much the focal point of this particular painting. I didn't go in here with all this stuff, and I didn't do too much in here, but you'll see me work this area, rework this area and this area a couple of times at least, just to get it right. And you can see I've lost the drawing over here. I could probably scrape all that off to find those lines, but I generally know where they are. The drawing at this stage is just a guide. It just tells me where stuff is. Do I follow it religiously? No. You'll see this in this particular demo. I go against the reference.
Another question is,
Mm-hmm.
do you usually place your darks with a palette knife to maintain texture?
In this particular technique, yeah, it's a way to get that color down fast and to create passages that I can't control. You can see I have to move that palette knife around and use the edge, and all this sloppy edge down here is something that went down and is not very controllable. Now I could slow down and spend time trying to control that. This, I drug some of the Gamsol into the paint to give me a range of value that's dark up there. That's something I hadn't done very much in past demos. But to keep answering your question, this establishes the drawing, kind of reestablishes the drawing. You'll notice when I bring up the reference again at some point, at a certain point, it becomes my interpretation of the reference. I don't want to be a slave to that reference. And the reason for that is because I want to give it my quality. You'll want to give your paintings your point of view, your perspective. There's a bunch of artists out there that will copy the reference verbatim because they love the reference. And shoot, I love the reference too. That's why I chose this stuff. But it's not a good decision for making it your own. Notice too that as I'm going through here now, I'm not correcting a lot. You see, I'm not spending a lot of time on one area. I'm slapping it down there and I'm building this in a very abbreviated, chunky kind of way. And eventually I'm going to pull all that stuff together. So all this is set up for when I come back later with the brush.
So another question is, how do you choose the background colors for a painting like this? And is it important to simplify the background from the main image?
Good question. It is important to simplify the background from the main focal point of the image. So you'll see as we get along here that I completely destroy this side of the helmet in order to let that edge go away. We'll talk about that in a minute, but the background, if you make the background softer, this is very simple. Softer edges recede, sharper edges come forward. So if you give the background softer edges, it's going to drop into the background. And if I sharpen up a line on the helmet, it's going to come screaming forward. So it gives it depth right away. This is pretty easy on this particular portrait because it's all about the helmet and not about the background. So the background, I sort of use the photography as a guide for value and then made my own marks and left it at that. Notice how ugly this is in here. Look at that. That is some really nasty looking brushwork there. The thing about the brushwork is that two things. One, you got to let it be what it wants to be when it goes down. Don't mess with it so much. Don't keep correcting it, making decisions. And the second part of that is to create good strokes. Most of what you see me doing is making decisions about how the paint sits on the surface of the painting. If it makes a gross mark, like that was kind of nice up there on the edge of the helmet on top. This stroke, not so nice, and this stroke, not so nice. It's got too much texture and junk in it. It's not clean, but the juxtaposition between a clean stroke and a messed up stroke is actually pretty pleasing to the eye. So I spend a lot of time making the strokes look good as much as possible, even the sloppy stuff. And now that sounds kind of zen, but there is a sloppy stroke that looks good, and then there's a clean stroke that looks good. And then there are strokes that are too planned and too neat. And I'm not crazy about those either, so I tend to mess them up. Speaking about messing it up, this is a mess, right? When you look at it compared to the finished painting, it's a striking, abysmal failure. It's the ugly stage. Everybody goes through that ugly stage. You have to go through it in order to build up the layers. And it took me many years to figure that out. Mostly it started when I tried to give myself, here's an example right there. That's pretty ugly looking. There, I freshened it up. I gave myself the permission to get better by failing, to learn how to put down the paint by trying it and discovering what worked and what didn't, at least for me, what I liked and what I didn't like.
So Greg,
And,
just a few people asking what surface you're working on. And do you have a preference of canvas or masonite?
Oh yeah, good question. This is gesso board. They're little 5-inch panels. Actually, they make all kinds of sizes, but it's a cradled board, so it sits up about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inches off the board. I like a firm surface, so I don't stretch canvas to paint on it. I hate that bounce. Um, I love it when I put the knife down and it bends like that. You just saw that. I like it when the brush bends. I don't like to tickle the canvas. I like to slam it on there, get
Well,
it on there, put it on, be deliberate.
with that in mind, somebody's asking, which palette knife are you using for the demo?
Oh, just a Dick Blick brand. Now this one's a little worn out on that top edge, so it gives me a weird little mark, but it's all mine because it wore out the way I wanted it to wear out. That came from scraping a lot of boards with that palette knife. I like to use it's very flexible, the very soft palette knife kind. So just go to Dick Blick and pick the ones that sort of have a nice bounce to it. Then you can find some that are stiffer, and I'll use a stiffer palette knife to get some of the sharper lines in there. It's when it comes to the equipment, people say, "What brush are you using?" And we just finished a semester together, Scott Fisher and I. If you don't know Scott's work, you must check it out. Maybe some of you know Scott from his Instagram videos. Wonderful stuff. And we taught a class together because we were used to teaching a lot together at the illustration masterclass. And Scott started showing one of his demos, and I had to ask him, "What equipment are you using? What's that pen you're using?" I just wanted to know. I just had to know. I haven't done a lot of pen and ink work in a long time, and I wanted to know what his equipment was. So it's good to ask equipment questions because it kind of gives you a leap toward getting close to what somebody's doing, you know. But ultimately, it's how the tool feels in your hand. You have to make that decision. So, oh, look at how ugly that is right there. Really bad. Oh, now it just got worse. Oh, that's painful. But it's the underpainting. Now I scraped it off a little bit there because some of the color was gross. So I put some fresh color in there. A lot of that stays and then I paint over.
So,
that color's for the edges of that light, by the way. Yeah, Lindsay.
do you consider telling a story or portraying emotion in your painting illustrations, even when you're using a reference?
Yeah, it's important to, it's interesting. A lot of people don't talk about this, but if you're doing a painted portrait, or you're going to do a painting of the Mandalorian and you're going to paint that freaking helmet, there's no expression on that helmet. There is only the light and the tilt. And that's how we pick up what he's thinking. And that goes back to ancient times, pattern recognition, which is in the way back in our brain somewhere. But what I try to do is bring a life to any portrait that I have. We're gonna, like I said, I'm gonna teach a whole semester on that. It involves, ooh, look at that mess, whoa. It involves the angle on the face. It involves the expression in the eyes. It involves separating the lips, opening the mouth, putting a hand into the painting, all kinds of stuff like that. Projects to the viewer what we think the person in the portrait or in the painting is doing. And I do that for 90% of my illustration work. I'm always asked to basically tell a story of some moment. My book, Timberline, Above the Timberline, is based on a story told in moments. Every time you turn the page, it's another moment. And the entire story is told moment to moment to moment. The expression of people, their body language, their facial expressions, their hands, the light, the snow, the forms and shapes all come together to project to the viewer what's going on, which is extremely important. And it's also important when you're doing portraiture to think about whether you're painting a pose or whether you're painting someone in motion. I think when I was painting this, I was thinking of the Mandalorian being in motion, catching that moment he twists his head to the left to answer a question, to look for an enemy, to pay attention to his environment. We don't know. We can't get that across in the painting unless I titled it Mandalorian looks left because he heard a sound or something like that. Now here comes the brush, by the way. Now it gets interesting. No, well, I was wrong. I put the brush back down. There it is. Okay.
Somebody did ask, do you use brushes?
Oh yeah, definitely. Now I always started out with brushes for my work, but I did a job a long time ago where they asked me to just make this wacky, crazy looking figure, portraits of patients for a pharmaceutical company. And I had to get the palette knife out in order to make it look nuts and crazy and get a lot of texture in there. And suddenly my work shifted and I started using the palette knife more and more to get this effect. I don't always use it. A lot of times I just paint straight with the brushes, different types of brushes, hog bristle brushes, and then even the one you see in here now is a synthetic brush. You can see right there. See the nice bend in the brush and stuff. It's really nice for pulling all that pigment together. And here's actual speed now. So you can see it's fairly deliberate, fairly slow. See, I love stuff like that. That drag over, the lines disappearing. Okay, we're back to 2 times speed. And at this point, I know where I'm going and I don't know where I'm going. All I'm paying attention to is every freaking stroke. Did it do what I meant it to do? Did it capture an edge? Did it relieve an edge? Did it work as far as value is concerned? Right here, I'm looking at shapes, all the shapes. Do they come together to show how the metal drops off on that edge of the helmet? Right there, I had a little trouble getting it to respond. Now, you can see there's no pigment on the brush. The pigment's on the painting. So I'm wiping, every time you see the brush leave the painting, I'm wiping that on a cloth.
Yeah, somebody was asking, what medium are you mixing with the paint?
So that's a good question too. I used to worry about that a lot. Now I don't worry about it any longer. And I had friends that told me, artist friends, that said, don't worry about that junk, man, just paint. And I tell that to you, just paint. Don't spend the amount of time I did worrying about that. Again, it goes to the equipment, what's comfortable. So lately what I've been doing is now I paint with the oil pretty much right out of the tube, mixing on the surface. It's got a wonderful feel to it. And then if I really have to cut it, then I use Gamsol, odorless mineral spirits. And I do that in the beginning. If I did a nice loose sort of oil wash on stuff, I just mix it with Gamsol. That's about it. Every now and then I dip it into Galkid, which speeds up the drying time. but mostly I'm mixing out of the tube. And at this point, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. What matters is what's on the surface. And I think you'll just have to trust me on this. In the future, they're going to be able to repair or take care of whatever they want. You're going to just think of it this way. You're going to keep the art restorers busy. The trick is whether they care or not. So your whole job is what's on that surface. You see, I got some cat hair sticking in there now. That drives me insane. Some of my students know. I just didn't even notice that. There's one floating right there. So back to the helmet now. The contrast between those sharp knife edges and the soft brush edges is everything to a helmet like this and to a painting in general. The contrast between the soft and the sharp is what you're shooting for, because that, that stroke was just about right. So it stayed in there. You can see it over here. The contrast between the sharp and the light is what directs the viewer's eye to look where you want them to look. You're not just recording reality, you're doing a painting. You're not just following reference, you're doing a painting. And a painting is an expression of you and what you're trying to say and how you think. And it's about communication. And I think it's high time we got back to communication. I'm sure you guys would probably agree. The conceptual artists wanted to throw communication out the window. It was all about the idea. As long as you had an idea, you had an expression of art. And the one thing they left out that they didn't think they left out was the communication. But that's another discussion anyway. Let's see, some of the light in the painting here, I noticed that I got it crooked here. Some of the light on the same strokes, like for instance, that last one I put in there, is changed when I shot this flat picture from the video. So this is more accurate over here. The video looks a tad brighter right now.
So Greg, is
Yeah.
is the 5x5 your favorite size to paint on, since you've done quite a few?
Yeah, I was trying to decide whether to do 8x8, 6x6, or 5x5 for the Mandalorian. So I said, oh, I know, I'll project the reference down onto these different boards, and that'll give me the idea of how the brushwork's going to look. And so as soon as it hit the 5x5, I just went, yeah, that's the right size. You know, Norman Rockwell loved to paint heads that were generally about 5 inches high, paint faces 5 inches high. And I think I know why. It's just a great size for the size brush against the amount of pigment that you can put on the brush, and then how it sits on the final painting. Just feels really good. Now, he painted heads that were far bigger than that and far smaller, and so have I. But I enjoy it because it's a little bit of a jewel. If I get the strokes right and I get the light right, and I come out with 90% of what I was shooting for, hopefully 98, then it becomes very special. I was happy with this painting, by the way. which leads me to another thing I wanted to get across tonight, which is, again, you notice I'm not fussing too much until I'm ready for it, like that edge right there. What's important to learn about the painting is how much to live with and how much to control. So let's just stop this for a second here. Pause it. Let's look at the reference now. Let's see where we're going. You see how I'm working on this thing right here, whatever it is. Pivot point for the helmet, whatever. To leave most of that out is the endeavor, but to capture the right amount of it is also the endeavor. Let's take a look back at the rep. Yeah, notice this line right in here. I notice now I didn't capture it, this little dark edge right in there. I'd like to go back in and probably do that on the painting, just because I like the relief between the two. But I left a lot of information out here. I only kept what was important, and you'll see that in a bit. I'm only keeping what's important to the structure of the work. I'm not trying to capture everything. I didn't capture this nice dark edge along there. I didn't capture too many subtleties in here. I definitely blew this whole thing out over there. I didn't capture all the detail here. The focal point of this painting is generally right about here. Being able to let go of that stuff is what you will come to on your own. It takes patience. It takes stamina. It takes decisions. And it takes being frustrated so much you throw your face into a pillow and scream half the time. But the one thing you don't do is try to keep correcting your brush strokes. No, that will kill the pigment. And then you'll be screaming even harder into the pillow. So there's a real juxtaposition of letting the paint be itself, letting the paint do its thing when you put it down, because it is only doing what you tell it to do.
So I think,
yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I think you're kind of answering this question, but somebody had said previously, in the underpainting, are you trying to hit the right color value from the start, or are you knowing that you're building up to something for, quote, right shape of color value to sit on top of? So I think
right. Great question. We're gonna pause this right here. Let me go back a second. Take that out. I want you to watch right in here. This will answer your question. Okay, let's go a little bit more. Let's do that again. There we go. Okay, now. So it is the setup of the color underneath that's waiting for my color on top. Sometimes I brush light enough that it doesn't disturb the color on the bottom because I don't want it to. And sometimes I press the brush hard enough to disturb the color on the bottom in order to kind of mix it with what's going on top. Now, when you watch this, I am thinking of the value in here, okay? Let's look at the reference. Is that the value in there? Here? No, not a bit. And I knew that when the brushwork went down. In my head, I'm going, oh, come on, man. You missed that value. So yes, at this point, I am searching for this value. And as you remember, I put it on there. Now it's nailed. That's pretty much the value. Let's see if it stays in there. Yeah, it got a little warm in here. Also went back into it, but you'll see me rework this area a bunch. It'll give you insight into the two things, the shaping of the strokes and also the layers of value and controlling the pigment once it's on the surface. I mean, when it's wet, you can lift the pigment off if you don't like it. That's fine. I tend to work with it. If it gets real gooey and ugly and dirty, then I might lift it off with a palette knife or something and then just do it again. But notice I'm not doing a lot of that. I'm just reshaping the pigment that's already on there. So again, to answer your question, all set up in the beginning is shape and value, and pretty much value first and then the shape. And the value dominates only just a step before the brush stroke. So as long as the stroke is putting down the right value, it can be kind of a lousy shape, but I want it to hit both. I want it to hit the right value and the right shape. If I don't, then I either change the value or change the shape or change them both. You can see here, that was not in the reference at all, but I'm following the value shapes in this side of the helmet and changing them to warm. Now here, watch this stroke. That's my bridge. I put a nice sharp edge right down there because this edge on the helmet is so nice. It's just so sharp. But I didn't change this side. And I know you guys are wondering, well, why the heck not? Because this side on the right was sharp enough and it didn't matter. As long as one edge was sharp, that's all I needed. And that allows interest. And it took me a lot of years to let go of my complete left brain, human mind to try to clean up and make patterns. That's the problem. We tend to want to clean up the world. We want to mow lawns, not let them go free. We want to trim the bushes, not let them go free. We want to paint rooms and organize furniture, and we definitely want to organize paintings. And that's the thing, if you're going to paint loose, you have to fight against that urge. And the fight, the struggle, is grand. It is wonderful. It is what gives you an expression of a painting. Your struggle between the patterning mind and the free-form right brain mind that says, let it go, is everything to paint, everything. And the reason I talk like this is because when I was in art school, they told me flat out that artists are inarticulate. And don't bother to talk about what you do because you won't know what you do. You don't know how to create. You have to let creation happen. And I said, that's a bunch of junk, because anybody that doesn't know how to talk about their work doesn't know what they're doing with the work. So at a certain point when I was teaching, I realized pretty quickly that where you guys are, and even some of the professionals in the room that are beyond me, in your skills and experience, the other ones, especially starting out, we started at the same place. I started like you did. As many of my students know, and some of my detractors do, that I'm not a fan of talent and could care less about that. And I hope you care less as well. But I won't get into that discussion tonight because so many people have heard that. I grouse about it. But I got to tell you, science is on my side. So there. Let's see. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you pace yourself and wait to add all those special moments you create with paint, those embellishments between painting?
That's such a good question, because it is about delayed gratification. I can't say it any plainer. A lot of the artists that I've spoken to about their work, we all tend to agree. It's just, you don't put those strokes in that mean something until you're ready for them to go down. You put them too early, then what are you going to live for? You know? So I wait. Although this one, I tended to just drive that yellow gob on the other side of his helmet pretty quickly. But now you see I'm refining and changing and reshaping those strokes to read. I could put them down once and walk away. They would have a certain feeling, but I like to make sure that those strokes not only tell a story about that form, but also are pleasing to the eye, as I mentioned before. But it's such a great thing to think about, what comes next. If your setup is going well, then you can get confused about where to go next because everything looks good. It just all looks like chocolate icing and you're ready to eat it. But it takes concentration. It takes focus. My palms were sweating during some of this. I'll admit to that. Because I wanted it to be right. I wanted it to look good on camera and all that. And that's okay. They do that when I get worried about certain sections on a painting where I want it to go down right the first time. And most of the time it goes down right. A lot of times, like this area you see me working on, I didn't like it before, so I wanted to adjust it. It is a mental game to decide what comes next as far as the finished part of the painting. And pay attention right now to how much there's left to clean up on this thing, right? Look at all this. I could clean this up. I clean up this edge. I think I do a little bit in here. Clean this up. I could clean that up. I could make all these edges nice and sharp and I could copy my reference. For anyone that's here tonight that thinks, wow, you didn't really nail the reference because you didn't paint it sharp like the helmet, I can only say that I would only have the reference if I did that. And I don't want the reference. I want the painting. And I want the viewer to feel the urgency and the timeliness that the paint projects by giving it that feeling of just having been what happened, which was tossed off. I'm only paying attention to the stuff I want to show you. The rest of it can take a walk. And hopefully that answered your question, but it is mental decisions all the way along. Notice how much I've worked around the entire painting. That took me years to figure out. And it's all based on value. I'm just bringing it all up. Not very slowly, but bringing it all up at one time. One long time. This took about an hour and 23 minutes, something like that, I think. You can see I'm adding a little bit of that warmth on that side. I just wanted to catch a little bit of that from the sunlight that might be striking the helmet or incandescent light that might be nearby.
So do you wipe the brush between each color change?
Yes, definitely. Unless I use some of the old color that I just was working with to mix the next color, then I wouldn't. But I wipe that brush off. I wipe the palette knife off constantly and recharge. I'm always cleaning the brush. Not necessarily in the Gamsol, but just to wipe off the extra pigment onto a rag or a paper towel. Because then I can use the color that's left over in there to slightly affect the color that's coming up next. And that's how you get all these muddy colors in there.
Another kind of, I guess, technical question was, how do you project the line to the surface? Because you said you had projected it.
Oh, yeah. You know, for years I've been using an artograph, and then I used a 1000J. Now, you guys, most of you might not know what that is. That was a gigantic 8-foot high armature with a mirror in it and a lens, and I would put reference in there on a board, and it would project it down with 4 60-watt bulbs. It's quite the old-fashioned thing. I still own it. It's great. It'll always work. It's wonderful. You could use, I think there's a couple of camera lucidas now that are on the market, which use prism kind of thing. But Artograph has now made a digital artograph. It's so beautiful. It will project in broad daylight, so it's quite nice. It is not about the projection. It is not about the tracing. It is about learning what that stuff can teach you about drawing. And then painting is basically drawing in motion, I guess, drawing in shape, you know. Yeah, so, and then when you project, then if you notice, we'll go back, we'll take a look at this in the beginning. You'll notice that I only paid attention to the very simplest of lines. This is good for this example tonight because that's what you do on a human head as well. Just general demarcation of lines. You just want a landscape. You want to find out where the architecture is of a head. Because when you start throwing pigment on there, it's going to destroy that drawing anyway. And just because you have a hyper realistic drawing underneath does not mean you're going to be able to keep it. Yeah, this is the harder palette knife now. I put those 2 stronger lines in with. And I didn't like that they were just a little sloppy, so I came in there with a brush, I think, at this point. Yeah, there it is. It cleaned it up a little bit. Clean it up a little more, and then blurred out the tip and clean that one up, and then screwed that up. Had to fix that. Okay, there we go. Let's see, I think I do, I do something else here. Let's see, where are we? Oh, we're almost done. This I may change. I put a little reflection in here. I may go in and just bring it back to straight red. If you guys think I should do that, let me know. Then I'm cleaning up a little bit of the lines here. You'll see I go into this again. Probably the 4th or 5th time I did that section. This one I blurred a little bit, the soft edge. And I think, well, there it is. That's the last. Okay, so we will, let's see. Yeah, I pulled all the stuff away and we are done.
So a question somebody had earlier was, how do you know when you're finished with the painting?
You know, I get that question a lot, and I've tried to answer it many times, and it's difficult to know. The best answer, here we go, starting back on the drawing. The best answer is to paint about 500 pieces and you will just understand. But that's kind of a cheat. That's not fair, even though it's true. The more you paint, the more you'll know. But I know when I'm done, when it completes kind of that image in my head. And also when I scream, stop, you're gonna screw it up. Don't screw it up. So here, look, this, you see the general lines again. Let's bring back the reference. I just did a bit of a circle here. I was gonna pay attention to this area like that. That's all I wanted to know. I just needed to know it didn't go up into here. It's over there. Now I could judge that on the fly. That's not a big deal. But this width on this is helpful. General shape here that I absolutely didn't pay much attention to. These general shapes, of course, to get the helmet right. And then this nice subtle stuff over here, I just lost all that. I didn't really care about that, but I did care because I wanted it to go away. So let's go through this a little bit here and show you. There's the established darks. And once I got those in, then I started to put the color in up here. And once I saw the color juxtaposed with the warm, the cool with the warm, excuse me, it started to establish in my head where I had to go. So I worked my way up from the darker cools on the left to the lighter cools on the right, based on value. Those of you here that have painted a bunch, I think this makes sense to you. You see how sloppy this is, you know?
So when you're for something so inanimate as this, do you develop a story? Like, what is Mando thinking? And do you develop something to identify with as you paint?
You know, I do. It's very subtle. When I was looking at this, I knew that my focus was generally here because that's the attention area that Mandalorian is projecting to me when I look at that photo. It's coming right out of his eyes. Now his eyes would be probably here and here, right? But this was an intense spot because it's an intersection of this very strong hard edge and the T-bone kind of eyes and nose, you know. This helmet is so much like the old Roman helmets or Sumerian, whatever they were. So what I wanted to capture was that intense stare that we think he has, and that comes from the tilt of the head. So that's all the farther I had to go. I just had to keep reminding myself that that was what I was going after. And so then I painted with that condition in my head. And then everything was subordinate to that. So at that point then, I would think, okay, whatever's over here on the left-hand side, I don't have to worry too much. Whatever's way over here on the right-hand side, I don't have to worry too much because the focal point is going to be right up and down here. Oops, there we go. And then the background should just be paint and nice strokes and in and out blurriness. And I should let go of edges on the top of the helmet. See, the helmet here is nice and crisp. I was going to put that purple in there. To me, this is purpley right here. And I didn't. I could have, but I ended up not because the warm cool was enough. And this stroke was a big blur and I just left it there. It's fine. It says there's a reflection glare. It says Manchess didn't care to clean up that edge. It says this is paint. It says this is a stroke. The one thing I strive for in any painting or portrait, whatever, is that I want the stroke to do two things. I want it to look like a stroke, and I wanted to define the form I'm going for without too much information. So it has to still look like a stroke and the information at the same time. That's the draw. That's the thing I'm searching for. Now, I'll give you another little secret about this. In some of those helmets, I would go back into them and see this little area up in here. I would ever so slightly put in a little bit of very refined detail. You don't feel it. I mean, you feel it. You don't really notice it because of all this movement of pigment. But every now and then with a little detail, it is reestablishes the quality of the drawing and the paint and the form you're trying to capture. Sometimes if I have trouble in a portrait or it's almost there, but it's not quite, I go into the eye and I will capture all the values in one eye or maybe both. And that tends to bring everything else into play. So that little secret alone that I just gave you that'll put 10 grand in your pocket down the road, right there. Oh,
How many,
yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
just how many hours in a day do you paint? Someone's asking.
I would love to say I just got up in the morning and painted all day until I dropped. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
And there was one time in my life that I did that. Well, it was several times in my life I did that. But one time recently was for Above the Timberline. 124 paintings. I did those in 11 months. The first 3 months of painting, I cranked out 49 paintings.
Wow.
And I was working constantly. And it was a dream job. I didn't stop. I just painted. All I stopped for was sleep, meals, to read a little bit, and to have some hot chocolate, and kept moving. That was it. It was wonderful, but boy, was I tired at the end of 124 paintings. So to answer your question, these days I paint generally. I love to get started in the morning, but after drawing and all that, I usually don't get going until maybe noon or 1 o'clock, and then I paint till 5 and take a break and then come back after dinner maybe. But since the pandemic, I haven't been getting a lot of painting done in that kind of schedule. I just work when I feel like I got to get something done,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are operating like that.
Yeah, I think so too. Hey, I'll tell you what, while we're taking other questions, Lindsay, I'll run this one
Sure.
in the background here. This is one I'm not sure that people have seen, but it's an octopus painting.
Yeah, the final of this, I believe, is what you had sent me for promotion for Instagram and stuff. So
Yeah, that's right.
people might have seen the finished painting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Speaking of finished painting, hang on, let's find out where the heck that thing is. Wait a minute. Nope, that's not it. Okay, well, yeah, here it is. Got it. Oh, that's my sloppy photo of it. There's probably a better photo, but we'll just go with that for now. Oh, let's go up to 10. Okay. Pretty much the same deal going on here. Same setup, you know. Pencil. I use acrylic to seal the pencil off. Big bold strokes on that. I leave some gaps. You can always fill them in later, but I like those little bits of white coming through. It keeps it crisp. So this one I sped up a little bit. We still have people hanging out, Lindsay?
There we have 47 people.
Aha. All the 10,000 that were coming had to go home already.
And then we have people over on the YouTube watching live as well. So
Oh, cool. Yeah, so that's another thing I'd like to do is put some more of these up on YouTube if people would like to watch them or study, whatever. I gotta say, let me tell you this. I I did not expect to be doing this when I started out. Not octopi, but I mean demonstrating oil paints online. First off, there's no way anybody could have seen online coming. And second off, was anyone going to be interested in what I painted? So it's just something that builds as you go. The purposefulness of your work comes as you go along. Some of us start out with a mission and some of us don't. Some of us come to it late. Some of us start early. The point I'm getting at is it doesn't matter. It only matters that you're expressing and joining the myriad of artists that have come before us. I only hope that I'm adding to the freaking caves at Laku. We're still cave painting. We're still communicating. We know a lot more about perspective and value and all that now, but those guys, whoever they were, those people, they were brilliant. And those cave paintings were not practice paintings. That was the final stuff. They practiced somewhere else, I'm sure of that. But we're adding as we go. Think about 500 years from now and how they're going to look back. Can we figure that out? Not really, no. But they will at some point. So you have to paint for you and you have to paint for your time. You can't be ahead of yourself and you can't be ahead of your time. That only works for the audience. They only see that as something they can't understand. But as painters, we don't do that. We don't start from that.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned you've been doing a lot of these online. Someone's asking where they could watch more videos. Do you have like a YouTube channel or where are you posting something?
I'm not posting a lot, I can tell you that. You're welcome to go to my Instagram page. There's a few things on there. They're not very clear, unfortunately, because of the camera. Some things are up on YouTube. So I think you can look up my name on that and you'll find it. But I do plan to put some more of these up. It's just fun. What's really fun, you guys should time lapse your own work. It's incredible to, like, when I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, really? I put that stroke there, huh? Okay. It's important learning tool. So time lapse your own stuff and take a look at what you're thinking. If you compare your work time lapse to some of the stuff that I'm doing, you might find that you're not moving around the canvas enough, or you might find that you're tickling the pigment too much, or you might find you're spending too much time in one area. All good stuff to know. I can say this, you got to leave behind the idea that you're behind in painting. Forget that. There will be times when you slow down to learn. There will be times when you speed up because you've learned it. Also, too, for those who are wondering, I did not set out to be a fast painter. I had no care in the world about that. My father died when I was a younger man, and I think that had something to do with me picking up the pace on my painting. But there parts of painting you slow down to learn, and there are other parts you just have to do it. So one of the hardest things for my students in any of the classes is to pick up their production speed. And there is nothing for that other than to just pick up the speed. And as you know, as you might guess, when you pick up speed, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. So do it and don't worry about it. And you can see I'm just correcting mistakes all over the place here. That's one way to think about this. And in the correcting, I see shapes and I build other shapes and I redefine the thing I'm working on. The other thing I can tell you is that it's just immense fun when you get to a point where you realize, oh, I know how to paint that. And I know how to tell a story about that. And I know how to communicate that to other people. And then when they respond, the dopamine hit is incredible. And all it makes you want to do is do some more. So
Somebody's asking, do you recommend outdoor painting?
I wish I did. When I first did, this stop, hang on. This is in two parts. Let me push up the other part here. We'll leave that Mandalorian right where it is. There we go. I wish I could recommend it. I can recommend it. I would say, yeah, go do that. For me, it's yikes. My first couple of endeavors for plein air painting are just horrifying, just terrible, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I realized, wait a minute. You don't paint everything. Except when you're out there and you look at stuff, it has detail. So everywhere you look, and as if you know how the eye works, everywhere you look is in focus. Everywhere you're not looking is out of focus. It's the brain's way of cutting down on the amount of information it has to feed through itself. So it only focuses on a very small spot, but try to catch that, and you can't, because everywhere you look is in focus. But you don't paint all that. And the best plein air painters that I've seen are the ones that can go out into the landscape and know exactly what to paint and how much effort to put into it and let the rest go. I could probably do more of it, but it's really a lot of plein air painting is just recording that moment, which is fun. But I tend to want to tell stories of moments with more people than landscapes. And that's generally my only answer for that, which is pretty weak. I go to the Society of Illustrators when I'm in New York, when I can. I'm not on deadline, and go to the drawing sessions at night. It's really wonderful. We have such a good time there. And anybody who comes through New York that's an illustrator, you should stop and join in. I use it to hone skills and refresh and try things with my drawing.
Yeah,
Not always successful. Go ahead.
we're doing our sketch nights online right now. So last night we had
Oh, that's right.
hosted, and then we have our next session coming up in February, which I'll just let me see what day.
Cool.
On the 4th. So if anybody wants to join in, it's all virtual. It will be with actually Johnny Dombrowski is going to host. So that should be a lot of fun. Which I
Oh,
can
wow.
throw that link in the chat for everyone.
Cool.
But yeah, we, hopefully sometime soon we'll all get back to being in person.
Yeah. It's going to be great. People are going to be hugging each other for quite a while. Unfortunately, the worrisome part is that we're going to be going through more of these, I'm told, by the scientists. And if we get it down now, we can get through them.
Yeah.
And so anyway, back to painting. um,
Question that had come up earlier was, are you using black for darks?
no, mostly not. These sections in here are of a mixture of um, transparent earth red and Payne's gray, of course, but this time I added some alizarin crimson in there too, just for that extra little boost of color and stuff. And then I did come in toward the end or in the beginning with some straight black in here and here and here. And I think a little bit in there, but not much. You can see I'm trying to add a little bit of detail into that foreground tentacle there. The thing with black is that you can use it. I advocate learning how to use black, so don't leave it off your palette, but it's going to give you a lot of grief. But the color that's going to give you more grief than black is ultramarine blue. Everybody thinks, well, it's a color, it's blue. That couldn't be bad. It's horrifying. It'll just muddy up colors so fast you can't believe it. Does that mean use black instead? No. It means study how artists use black and when to use black. And eventually you can use black to mix. I hesitate to say this, but you can mix it for flesh. But you have to really know what you're doing. And you really have to practice with that. So that's the end of our octopi there. And, if anybody's interested, I don't know how much time you have, Lindsay. I could just start this and we can segue out if you want. But here you go. I don't know if anyone has seen the Poe painting.
Yeah, if anybody has any, final questions you want to ask Greg, you can do that now. We'll probably wrap this up in about, I don't know, 10 or so minutes, bring us to 7:30.
Cool. I will, let's see. Does this have a 20 times speed? Well, that's pretty fast. Yeah, any questions at all? There are no taboo questions, or at least I should say there shouldn't be any taboo questions. So if you're afraid to ask something, I'm probably your best candidate on that. There were so many questions I wanted to ask in the beginning, and I got made fun of. And in art school, they used to pin my work up on the wall and laugh at it because I wanted to learn how to draw. Pretty sad. I tried to maintain a smile, and I'm over it. Hardly. Now here's a good point. That layer right there, that's not the top layer of color. You see, that's the underpainting. That's the layer of flesh below the top surface. Why do I do that? Because I'm building my way up to the top surface. And you can see I jumped ahead on that side right there and put some top surface stuff on there. Just remember, whatever I tell you, it's probably not going to flow that way in the paint. I'm teasing.
So do you photograph your paintings for reproduction yourself?
I wish I did. I still have not solved that. A lot of my friends can shoot it very well. Oil paint will drive you up the freaking wall when you shoot it. You have to have lights at, no, not 45 degrees, probably 30 degrees in order to get the reflection down. Don't use paralyzing lens. Paralyzing. A paralyzed lens. Yeah, you know what I mean. Or lights, because it adds contrast. Sometimes the contrast you don't want, but polarizing lens and polarizing filters. I'm sure I'm going to pay for that mistake now, just like I did crumping years ago. Anyway, I wish I did, but I I sent it out to a guy that was remarkably good. Unfortunately, he had to shut down, and so he recommended a photographer, a scanning place in Queens, New York, Lamont Photography, Laumont. Tom is the guy there, and you can tell him I sent you. But he does fabulous scanning, and you can control the lights from having both lights on the scanner on or one set of lights on so it gives a shadow to the brushwork, that kind of thing.
So somebody else is just curious on your view of painting traditionally versus digitally.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good question. Yeah. No, I love digital. I love digital art, and I love painting digitally when it's working. When the computer gives me fits, I want to throw a rubber brick through the freaking screen. But I'm learning. I'm learning more. I started out wanting to be a digital artist. That was back before a lot of you were alive. Back in the Stone Age, I was going to be a digital artist because mostly it was in the purview of the scientists at the time, and I thought it would be cool to paint digitally. But when I found out how much effort it took to learn programming, I lost the enthusiasm for it. And my painting was coming on faster and faster, and I just drifted over toward traditional. So now I'm trying to drift back to, look at him, he's cross-eyed right now. I'm trying to drift back toward digital. I've been working on it a lot, and I've worked doing my particular approach with it that feels painterly, and also with more of a graphic approach to it. I find that my students are pretty much the example of what I was in the beginning, which is versatile and interested in many different styles and approaches. We're trying to find our one thing, but we all have many one things within us. I behoove you to search them all because all of them add back. That chorus of voices in your head adds back to the singular voice that you're trying to parse out of that chorus. And you will at some point, because it only makes sense. You just can't keep painting from the chorus all the time. You have to make a decision. When you do make that decision of that particular singular voice, you'll be so excited about it because you'll learn so much from that. And then you'll realize how much more you can do after that by having singled out that one voice. And then you can get versatile. I work in pastels, I work in gouache, I work in watercolor and oil. I'm soon to get back into my sculpting. If you're an artist, you can do these things. Notice control of edges on that eye. It was all about which edges are sharp and which edges are soft.
For this painting, are you relying on just the initial drawing, or are you looking at reference for this as well?
Oh, yeah, I didn't bring up the reference. It's that typical Poe photograph that is so fantastic. And I just thought, oh, it was Halloween and I saw one of them. So I thought, he's such great form in the face. So right now, what you can't see is I have my computer near the drawing table and my painting, and I'm studying the photograph, and I'm studying the drawing I made from the photograph to remind me what to leave out and what to leave in, what's important, what's not. Like this edge is not important, and this edge is not important. And yeah, so I'm working from photography of Poe on that. I'm changing a lot. It wasn't a color photograph. I'm making all the color up. out of my head. I'm not looking at any photographs for that. Changing the shape in the hair and brush strokes and stuff. Basically making it my painting of Poe, and you'll do the same, with that. I also want to do, I did a exaggerated drawing of this that you can find on my Instagram page. What is my Instagram page? G Manchess, I think. And
Put it in the chat for everyone.
oh, great. Thanks, Lindsay. And you'll see the distortion on the head and stuff. I love doing that as well. I want to do a painting of distorted Poe head too. It's about the shapes and the values and the forms and the color, and that never stops. And when you work it out to the point where you enjoy laying the pigment down and it does what you tell it to do, it's worth the effort and it's worth the time. Not much else to say on this. I haven't already said, I think, on the other paintings, but I think this gives you some insight as to how this pigment is going down.
Yeah, so many people are thanking you and commenting that, just such great advice just by watching, I guess, your demos from this year.
Yay.
Someone else said that they needed a review of core concepts. Just lots of really nice positive comments as well.
Nice. Thanks, guys. That's great to hear. I always tell everybody, I started out against the odds. I was told that I was never going to make it any number of times. Maybe you've already heard that too. Depends on what you want to do. I don't think there's any crystal ball that'll tell you whether you're going to quote unquote make it or not. But if you come to my Smart School class, I can show you how to do this, or at least guide you through what you're trying to accomplish. And as I said, we're going to do a whole semester on portraits. So, and true to form, in my class, I'm starting to lose my voice here. It's getting all rough.
We can wrap it up for everybody.
Cool.
Obviously, thank you, Greg. I mean, this was totally amazing.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay. And thanks for being there for me to ask the questions. I think that works so well.
Yeah.
Because then I don't get distracted by that, and you can call out the timing, and it worked really well.
Works for me too. It gives me time to place the questions at the right moment, and I think it flows.
Oh, nice. That was great. They did work out. Like, it seemed like the timing was really good. So thanks.
So just so everyone knows, this will now live on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and rewatch the video that you just saw tonight. Also on our Instagram page, you can watch the video of Greg when he did the Art Out Loud online. So you can check that out there as well. And as Greg mentioned, if you are in New York, the Society is currently open. We are doing time ticketing, so you would need to pre-purchase a ticket before arriving, but we are open and we are doing a lot of events online. The best way to follow us is probably our Instagram, which is at SOI128, if you want to kind of keep in touch and see everything that's going on. But I'm starting to lose my voice too there, Greg. So,
well, good. I don't feel so bad.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
And we will see you soon, right, Lindsay? We'll just we'll do another one of these sometime.
Yeah, stay in touch. More demos with Greg and maybe some other kind of special events. So stay in touch for sure.